Welcome to Something from Nada, the only podcast designed to explore entrepreneurial stories of determination, focusing on first-generation immigrants and underserved leaders. In each episode, we'll introduce you to the unlikely changemakers, shattering intergenerational cycles as they defy the odds to build something amazing from nothing. My name is Nada Ahmed, and I'm your host. My guest today is Shanaz Hemmati, the co-founder and COO at Zen Business, an all-in-one platform that helps small business owners incorporate and ensure future compliance. This is a story of a brave woman who moved to the US at the mere age of 16 to get an education. Little did she know that her home country of Iran was going to go through a transformative revolution a few months later, and her chances of going back were going to get very slim. She decided to stay and built herself an inspiring career within technology. Let's dive in. Welcome to the show. Thank you, Shanaz Hemmati, for being here with us today. Shanaz is the COO and the co-founder of Zen Business. Now, if you are a founder, anyone working with startups, Zen Business is a company that you need to know about. Actually, I had a guest come in my podcast who, that was the first thing she recommended, was that if you're a founder, if you are thinking about starting a big business, Zen Business is what I can recommend.
Awesome.
And I found out about Zen Business when I was starting my business, and I had just moved back to Texas, and I typed, like, how do I start a business? And Zen Business comes up. It makes it really easy for me. I was immediately attracted to the customer journey, like the design of the website, and you had these like very easy way of figuring out what I want, because it was like a chat box. And this was before the AI hype that's today. Maybe this was like a year and a half ago, not that long ago, but just very intuitive. And immediately I was like, yeah, I think this is what I need to start my business, so that all the hard stuff that would have slowed down my starting my business and made me cringe because I don't understand all the documentation, I don't know exactly what I need, I was able to hand that over to professionals who are very good at doing that. So thank you for Zen Business. Thank you for creating that. And before we go into the details of Zen Business and what exactly it does, maybe talk to us about, who are you?
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me on your show.
Yeah.
It's just great to listen to some of your previous podcasts, and I never knew about you until you pinged me. And then I'm like, wow, she's doing something really great, which is like also needed. It's great to always hear stories of people that had similar journeys to you. So me, Shanaz Hemmati, I was born and raised in Iran. I moved to US when I was 16 years old. And that was 45 years ago, believe it or not. And that was a couple of months before the revolution happened in our country. You can imagine being in that position, being from that country and moving to a different country where then conflict starts, where the hostage situation.
Were you in the US when that happened?
Yeah, I was in US. I was at UT. Actually, at that time, I was in college. And then later on, went to University of Texas in Austin. But yeah, being here through all of that, there was like some learnings and kind of how that helps you to be more resilient.
Yeah, tell me about that. Like how you move here at 16. Did you have to learn the language? Is that something you were pretty confident in? You said you didn't say this, but I read that you had a sister here. I guess that helped. Did you go to high school, or did you go directly?
Yeah, so what happened, a little more about my history, is I was the last child of 5 in my family. So by the time I was growing up, my parents were pretty tired with the rest of the crew, and they were all like much older than me. I grew up in a way where I had to figure out a lot of things on my own, because by that time, most of my siblings have left the house too. Of course, they were all like close by, and they each one of them almost played a mini parental role with me as well. When I was growing up, I was really watching around me, like people around me, and my mom, who I always called her like the CEO of the house. She was very strict in particular about all of us getting educated and being on our own, regardless of whether we were a girl and a boy. Of course, there were always like some differences in treatment between the two. But she, like, that was one thing that she was pretty hard with all of us on. So then I'm watching the rest of my siblings, and we all came from a science background and like really strong in mathematics and science overall. And them, most of them being engineers, you know, and those days, of course, in our culture, like in our type of families, either you need to become a doctor or become an engineer.
Most
a lot of people can relate to that.
Most people I know from Iran are doctors or engineers, and Iran has one of the highest literacy rates in higher education.
Correct. That's true. And then I could also see the opportunities in Iran where if you got your college degree from another country, and where you could be more fluent in English and like some really good accredited university, then the treatment and the job opportunities were different, right? They're better. So that's where it led me into starting that conversation with my parents, especially my mom, of I really want to go somewhere else for my college degree. And also because those days, it was really competitive to get to a good university in Iran. There were very few universities and a lot of super smart kids that would apply for them, right? When a couple of months before the revolution, where all the rallies started in our country, the high school that I was in was one of the major high schools in Tehran, and that was one of the first ones that would start shutting down because all the rallies would start first thing in the morning, and the kids would start breaking windows, the school would shut down, we all had to go home. So that is when I pushed my parents to send me to US because one of my sisters and her husband were already here in Austin. Her husband was getting his master's at UT. And then my parents agreed, and that would also was going to help me to graduate from high school a year early just because of the difference in the systems between the two countries. So luckily, everything worked out in a matter of a few weeks, which, sometimes you also wonder, oh my God, like how easy everything worked out for me versus another friend who it took them like much longer to get things going. But I was lucky, again, to get everything worked out. And I came here, joined my sister and her husband. But then in a few months, they decided that they were going to go back to Iran after the revolution happened. And that was where then the hard decision was for me and my parents to make. I was so lucky where my mom, she was really, even though she was not educated, but we always said if she had a college degree, she would be like running the country or be like in a high position somewhere. She was really open-minded, and she did a lot of research. She would just talk to people all the time, learn so much all the time about, what's something that's coming up? What is a good thing to do here? What's a good thing to do? Yeah, very curious. Yeah. So she gave me the option. Do you want to stay or do you want to come back? And I think she was more about knowing that I had certain goals. She wanted me to achieve my goals. She saw that as an opportunity for me if I wanted to stay here, versus if I went back, I wouldn't have had the same opportunities. So again, I was so lucky that they gave me the option, and I said, I like to stay. So whatever they were thinking for a 16-year-old girl to stay on the other side of the world by herself. Of course, my sister had some friends here, and I was able to just have them as my guardian for a couple of years until I turned the legal age. So that was basically the start of my journey here in US. And then, as I said, I had certain...
Did you embrace the American life right away?
So you asked me about either I knew how to speak English or not. So when I was growing up, it was... a really, especially if the parents or the kids already were thinking about going somewhere else for their higher educations or college degrees, there were a lot of like English classes, English as a second language. So I did take some classes And that was like before I moved here to US. So when I first came here, and I remember going to the high school that I was going to get accepted to, and the principal had an interview with me, and he said, "Oh, great, enough English. Like, just go start taking the subject classes. You don't need to go to English as a second language classes." So, and I can tell you my grammar was a lot better then than it is now. Sometimes I feel maybe my speaking had improved, but I think I knew more words and my grammar was better. But anyway, and then as far as the lifestyle, a lot of people would ask me, "Oh my God, your lifestyle must have changed tremendously." But my response always was, nothing really changed with my lifestyle, except that I'm away from my family, right? I don't have my family close by. My lifestyle, as far as how I walk and talk and, what I wear and, what I eat and what I do hasn't changed. Just that getting adjusted to a society or a culture where the language was different. So now my everyday language is something else. There are certain things that you learn by just growing up, like certain slangs, for example.
Absolutely.
Certain maybe what's the norm here? What do you say here? That I didn't know. And that's true for anybody who first moves here. And that takes you years to learn.
How long was it after you went and visited your family back?
Yeah, that was also the other interesting part, because I remember when I was leaving, I was telling my mom that I would want to definitely come back every summer. During the holidays or the end of the year, whenever I get a chance, I would like to come back. With everything that happened in Iran, it was very risky for those kids on student visa to go outside of US because there was a possibility that they do not get their visa back into US. Of course, some of us didn't want to risk that. We were here with a certain goal of going to college, getting our degree. So for me, it was like, I don't want to take that risk because at the minimum, I would want to take that risk once I have my college degree. Right. So then the war started, so that made the situations worse. And then I graduated, and again, that was like when the war was going on in Iran too, so I didn't want to go back. Of course, by that time, my mom was able to get her tourist visa and come join me here, which was great, just having your mom around after a few years.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking. Having left home thinking you were going to see her in a few months or maybe maximum a year, and then not seeing them for maybe years.
Yeah. But unfortunately, my father passed away during the same time. So that was like the hard,
that must have been
because I felt like I missed a lot. But then having my mom here really helped with the situation. Yeah. So the first time I went back was after I was married and I had my green card in US and the war has ended. It was in 11 years, after 11 years.
Wow. And how was that?
It was interesting because so many things had changed in that country, and which was like very different than when I left it. Right. Of course, I would hear a lot of like stories. So going in, it was a lot of fear because I didn't know. Yeah,
and also you were very young when you left.
Exactly.
You were a child. We think 16-year-olds, I remember when I was 16, I thought I was an adult, but you're still...
I definitely thought I was an adult.
Yeah, but you're still quite young. You haven't seen the world. Yeah.
Exactly. Like what you've experienced when you were 16 years old anywhere is very different than when you're like become 30 years old or 28, 9 years old. Yeah. So but it was great to go back to where you grew up. As much as I couldn't recognize a lot of it, because even the city structure had changed a lot in 11 years. But it's just that nostalgic feeling. There was a lot of that. And also seeing the rest of my family, which I hadn't seen for 11 years, was really great. But at the same time, I saw and experienced things that I wish that was not the case. But you know, it's
that's the reality. And sometimes things change for the better, sometimes things change for the worse. But something that makes us resilient is also accepting the transitory nature of life. Things will never remain the same.
Exactly.
And I think once you start accepting that, of course there's going to be nostalgia and you're going to miss things, but you start also appreciating that. Yeah. Now, how do you think that being that immigrant and studying at UT shaped your earlier career and some of the risks you were willing or not willing to take because you were in that situation?
So, it's interesting because I have been told before, once or twice, that I can't deal with change. And I'm like, I am really surprised. This person definitely does not know me. If they knew enough about me, they would think very differently, because all the changes I have gone through, a lot of people similar to me, yourself, have gone through. Those to me were all like really high risks we took in our lives, right? At different stages too. It was not just when we were 16 years old. I felt like I constantly was making major decisions and was taking a new risk in my life for even now. I feel like
doing things that you'd never done before.
Exactly.
Or being that trailblazer.
Getting out of your comfort zone, as you said. Just us moving here at that age. Then just making all the decisions when my family wasn't here to help me out with those decisions. Like even deciding what university to go to, what major to study. And some of that, it like didn't come with a lot of thinking or decisions. Maybe it was just like, oh, I'm just going to go do this. But then how we pivoted if we needed to, right? And one thing that really helped me was when I was in my senior year at UT, I was studying electrical and computer engineering. Now, how I went to electrical engineering school is a very interesting story, because, of course, I knew I wanted to go to engineering school, but I wasn't sure which major. And I remember when I was growing up, one of my brothers is a mechanical engineer. The other one, civil engineer. Sister is industrial engineer. And I remember one time my mom just casually mentioned, oh, I wish one of my kids was an electrical engineer. So then when I was making that decision, I'm like, where do I do? I'm like, okay, maybe I do electrical engineering.
Make my mom's dream come true.
I don't know any better now. But then I had to pick a minor. There were like 5 different areas that I had to pick from at UT. And computer always, at those days, it just seemed very interesting to me. I felt like it was going to be more challenging, that I'm just going to like it more than other areas of like control or communication. So I picked computer. And then doing that in electrical engineering school meant that I should have become a hardware designer. But during my senior year, having taken some software classes too, I realized that, oh my God, I really like software more than I like hardware. And I remember that time, my brother-in-law also encouraged me to get more on the software side. And that's what I did. I went back to school, took more software classes, and then started my career as a software engineer, as a programmer one.
Yeah, and I also read somewhere where you said, you were quoted saying that I love databases. There are not many people I've heard them use the word love for databases, but I thought maybe that also speaks a little bit towards your engineering mind, or like the way that your mind works. That what do you think it says about who you are, how you think, and then what has allowed you to succeed in creating a company, a digital company, focused on SaaS?
Yeah, data at some point, of course, as a programmer too, you deal with data a lot, right? And then through the opportunities I was in and the projects I worked on really early on in my first job, I started learning so much about data and databases side of the solutions that they were being built. And that looked really interesting to me. So early on at one company, it actually was the first startup that I joined. I decided to join the data team there. And then that was the start of, I think that was really the start of my discovery and my journey, and how it took me to the next level and how it helped me in my future career life. And the reason I really liked data, because with my personality, it was like more structured type of thing you could work with. It was like being involved in a really early stage of a design of a solution. It's because you have to capture data regardless of what you're building, and you have to put a structure in place for what you're capturing in order to even start coding.
It's like the back end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like almost like the foundation of your building. And then how that foundation and what you store comes into play as you build more and as you need to go back and look at it and use it to analyze the performance, whether it's the performance of your code, whether it's the performance of the pain point you're solving for. And then all the details that went to it. I'm a really detail-oriented person. I've always been. And that was, again, super interesting to me. And that's when I found out and realized I really had great passion and love for doing that type of work.
It was your superpower, right?
I think so, yes.
And that's also a message for maybe our younger audience, is that most people don't know what their superpower is. And they often do choose careers based on what someone said, maybe some inspiration, but you don't know if you're necessarily going to be good at being an electrical engineer or whatever you choose. And then later on, when you get these exposures, like you were exposed to databases and you were like, you know what, actually, your mind is able to structure it and able to visualize it and is able to make that foundation that other people cannot. And that's where, if you really focus on, you can excel and exceed expectations.
Yes, that's so true. Like finding that. And I think sometimes we have a fear. Maybe it's not a good idea if I change direction or way a little bit, where to me it's fine. You can always go back to what you were doing, but then you don't have the regret of I never tried this. And I'm always so glad that I tried it. And I always really appreciate there's one or two people that at the time encouraged me to go focus more on the data side, because they probably noticed something that I didn't know already. And they thought that, oh, you probably will be good at this. Yeah. So that was super helpful for me, where, again, people pushed me a little bit in those directions.
You need someone who kind of pushes you or inspires you and says, I'm going to give you this task. And then they see that this person is able to actually do it really well. So with that exposure that you got to data, was that at your first tech company that you joined, a startup?
Yeah, my first job was with the state of Texas, but I was lucky that I was part of a division where the division director was treating the whole group almost like a startup within the state agency. And during the time that I was there, we had to re-engineer one of the major systems of the organization. So through that, in the 7 years, I learned a lot because I was also given the opportunity to play a bigger and bigger role every year as I was there, because I think they could see how passionate I was, how motivated I was, and how much I wanted to get done. And then during the dot-com boom, I was recruited to go join a startup company at that time. And after being there for a little while, I also realized, oh my God, how much I love being part of a smaller company that is trying to solve a pain point. I loved the culture. I loved how everybody knew each other. I could just stop the CEO in the hallway and start talking to them. And then I could also wear many hats at the same time and learning so much more in a shorter period of time than maybe I would have at my previous job to that or at a really big company. Right. Yeah, that's where I stepped in during my journey there at that company, is when the head of data those days, she talked to me and convinced me to go join the team after I was there for a year or so. And then she left and I took over the team leadership, which I think that was also part of what I always thought that I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure about, was like almost like managing something bigger than just like my little space. So
talk to us about that transition going from being someone who does things, who executes, who's like takes care of the database, knows where everything is, to then leading, where then you also have to depend on others to do that. And letting go of that control, because I think that's a lot what first-time managers struggle with. It's like,
very hard.
I used to do it this way. I used to do it really well, and then they become micromanagers.
Yeah, it's really hard to do, right? I think more in the smaller companies, startups, and the companies that are moving fast, even as a first-line manager, you're still really hands-on, right? So that helps with not having to completely be hands off, because you still feel like, oh, you see everything, you're working together with everybody else to solve for the problem. But then it gets harder and harder as you go up the ladder to a bigger role with a bigger team, and then you have to keep on letting go of more and more. I would say it is not easy to do. It's really hard to do. It just takes time. You just have to trust, and you also have to look at it yourself too and say, okay, do I want my boss to trust me with what I own and what I need to do? If that's the case, and that's my expectation, then I have to realize that expectation with people that are reporting up to me. But then at the same time, be in it where they can come to me if they want to solve a problem and they need my help, and I just be able to provide the direction and help out. And I could also like step in. For the longest time, I stayed so close to things, again, because of the nature of the job, and a lot of times because of the limited capacity and resources, I had to stay very close where I could just step in and help solve a problem. But then these days, I don't do anything, hardly. Yeah. It's like stepping in again, unless it's needed. But at the same time, like staying very close to what the team wants to do, where they need my support and my help. But as I said, it's not easy. It's a journey that you have to go through, and it just takes training. That's why I think like at companies, as they want to promote people, and people who like to start managing stuff, is the first thing should be run them through some training. I think that is super important. Sometimes we just drop people in and expect them to do everything we expect a manager to do, and that's not easy.
No, because leadership is a skill, but it's a practice. Like the more you practice it, the better you get, but you're not going to know it on day one. No one's born a leader, you become a leader. And I really liked what you said about trust, because whenever I have people issues, like in teams or with people reporting to me or even with co-founders, I always like reflect on it, and it comes down to like trust, right? Am I not trusting them? Like, why am I having these feelings? Because I'm not trusting them. Or if they're doing something, I'm like, what have I done to make them not trust me? And it always comes down to that in the end. And it's, okay, what do we do from here to build that trust? And sometimes that's going out and having lunch together and just talking and building that relationship. And I think so often we forget that as we're working on doing and executing things, that at the end of the day, as much as we're like coding and working on hard tech, soft tech, whatever it might be, it's about people.
It's all about people.
It's all about people. And that's what I've also really find remarkable about you, is that as much as you're technical, your focus is always on, you've said several times about culture. That culture is so important. And is that something that you think you've learned over many years of working with people, that, oh my God, I can get the code right, but if I can't get the people right?
Exactly. Yes. First, I think I always say what I have been able to accomplish in my life, it's all about people. So when somebody asks me, what is your biggest success in life? I say, the people I have came across. That is my biggest success. Because at every phase or every stage, when I sit down and think about it, there was somebody whether it was my mom, whether it was my dad, whether it was my sister, whether it was my schoolmate, whether it was my roommate, later on, my school teacher, the counselor at the embassy that gave me visa, my coworker. These were all people
that made it happen.
that made
things
it
happen.
happen for me to go to the next phase or to go to the next stage. So when I think about it that way, then I'm like, okay, then I need to be that person in everybody else's life too, especially as I get to a place and point where I'm like, okay, I'm getting older, been through a lot, and how can I help and make a difference in others' lives? And with that comes your values. When you start a company, when you want to build something and you want other people to be in that journey with you, how you want to build an environment where it gives room to everyone to truly be a part of it. It gives them the freedom to own something, because unless that's the case, you can't be as successful as you want, because you can't do everything yourself, right? If I could do everything myself, I wouldn't hire anybody else at the company. So
Exactly.
I can't. I need smarter people. I need other people who have expertise. And again, everybody needs to take a piece of the puzzle and run with it and own it. And then how it can work well, especially as you grow as a company, is what kind of values are you setting and communicating with everyone, so everybody knows, regardless of how previous environments that they were working at were, or other companies, maybe something is different in this one. And that difference to me is first like trust and respect, right? We're all in this together. We all like, I am no better than you, you're no better. Like we all is at the same level. Let's just start there, right? Don't think of me as the COO of the company. Think of me as someone else that is in this together with you, and we're all trying to achieve the same thing and solve for the same thing. So having that respect and trust is super important. Being the team player, and I know we say this everywhere, but being a team player, to me, it means something different in different places, right? To me, a team player is like, oh, this person needs me right now, whatever it is that they want to talk to me or they want to solve for. How am I going to go make the time to do this? Or if it's something that I can step in or do something else that will really enable them and help them move forward, that's what I call like a true team player. And then having an environment where everybody's invited to dance. When I say that, I love dancing, by the way. And I read somewhere somebody said this is if you're invited to a dance party, but then you're not invited to dance, then you're really not invited to be a part of this. So to me, even like in a company, in whatever you're building, if you're inviting people to come join you, you're inviting them all the way to the table to have opinions, to be a part of it, to provide feedback where needed, to have ideas. Because other than that, I don't think you can move as fast or be as successful as fast, as quickly as possible. And it's all about those different backgrounds and diversities that can help you be a more successful team. So I think part of our culture and values, and I say this in every new employee welcome meeting that we have, is there is a section that I talk about DEI at our company. And again, a lot of that is part of our culture and values. And I say that's near and dear to my heart. I've been through a lot during my journey, and something that we want to do differently here at this company is that our diversity is not just a number that we're going to present. To me, that number doesn't mean anything if it's just a number. For me, it's more about first, do we have diversity across the board at all the different departments, different roles and levels, from individual contributors all the way to the C-level, right? And do we then let them be part of it, right? Then again, you can have a huge diversity number that you're living to, but if you're not allowing them to participate, and if you're not also taking their feedback and listening to them, then it's a failure, right? You failed at that. So that is super important to me. And I always tell people, we hire everyone here to have an opinion. I always say I'm a very opinionated person, so you can always ask for my opinion. Yeah. But we also hire everyone because we want to also hear from somebody else. Somebody who might come in with a great idea, a new idea, a very simple thing to do something different. And that will add a huge value. I'm not saying we always are able to get all the opinions and to do everything. We're not. But it will help us make better decisions.
And that, I guess, can be a good measure, because people say, okay, how do you really measure? If you're not going to measure the numbers, how do you measure diversity, equity, and inclusion? But I guess a good measure is like seeing how many people are speaking up, how many different people are speaking up with different ideas. Are they scared to speak up?
Exactly.
And what happens after they speak up? So you can measure those things, and you can see, is there friction in our teams? Which is a result of diversity, because people think differently. If you have no friction, if everyone's always agreeing with boss, maybe there's a problem.
There's a problem, definitely. It's important that it also comes from the very top, like our CEO. He's amazing. Him and I go back over 20 years together at different companies, but I can be very open and honest with him. And he's not going to take that against me. No, he might have a good reason based on my feedback. He might think about it and he might make a different decision, but he's always open to hear. And I always provide my honest feedback and opinion. But in those cases, like, he's the one that made it comfortable for me to do, right? As much as like I always was comfortable doing that, but not everybody is. So it's upon all of us to create an environment where people feel comfortable and they know they're not going to be penalized. They're not going to be judged. They don't have a fear of when they have an idea that might be very different than what their boss is saying, to still come forward. And that's what we look for.
That's what we look for.
And we encourage. That we constantly say, we encourage you.
We encourage that. So some people might look at you and say, she's a very experienced professional entrepreneur. She's achieved so much in her life that she can be more secure in like her decision making, in when she brings up these conversations with, your co-founder, your CEO, etc. Are people making an assumption, or do you still have moments of when you feel insecure?
I think so. First, like, I was a really in some cases I was pretty outspoken even when I was a kid. So I think that kind of was somehow in my personality.
That's who you are. You're a disruptive woman. Yes.
That's in my personality. But during my career too, when you're just starting something new, especially like starting a job, I've never experienced that. I was just figuring out what is it to start working at a company, working with all these people every day, like things you want to accomplish. So you learn a lot and you get very watchful, right, of what you say, what you do, your behavior. But as I went through it, one thing that made me comfortable, again, comes back to people, where people around you make you really comfortable, regardless of how much more experience they have compared to you. If you're much younger, it doesn't matter. They just make you very comfortable. And that then gave me confidence, or the feeling fine about having my ideas,
your
and
thoughts
my
and opinions, that they were valuable.
And then at some point, how I was like thinking about it was like, if I am in an environment and they don't care about what I have to say about anything, then that's the wrong place for me. that does not jive with my personality. And sometimes maybe it's a personality thing, because you feel like if I'm in this, if I am building something, if I'm putting all this effort into it, I should be able to have ideas, or I should be able to provide an opinion without any judgment. So that's how I looked at it. I'm like, if they don't feel like they want to hear this, that means they don't want me here. And I better go look for something else that that is a place for me where I can thrive and I can be a part of it.
Yeah. So you were pretty self-confident. I guess that's what it comes down to, because I coach some founders and I often hear like those self-doubts creep in them, and then they're like, yes, but do I approach them? Do I confront them about this? Or I'm not being included in these important conversations. And they might even be like co-founders, right? And then feeling like, yeah, but if I confront them and this escalates, then maybe our alliance is not going to work, and this idea is not going to work, and I'm not going to find anything better, right? So it's like also then this feeling of then I'm lost, and feeling like there are not any other opportunities for me.
For me, being very happy and at what you do is really important, because that is what determines your health. And maybe I didn't always realize that, right? But at some point, as I was going through my journey and I had to deal with major health issue, then I was like, oh my God, I wonder if all this stress and unhappiness did this to me, right? And that is when I was like, you need to be very happy and love what you do. When you wake up in the morning, you should be happy to step into, oh, I'm going to go to my office. I'm going to go do this job. This is my work. And I'm excited about it. I love doing this, which that love is not just doing the specific tasks, but it's the whole environment. I love working with these people. I love working with this person that is my boss or is my manager. And for me, nothing is 100% perfect. Never, nowhere you go. But how I measure my happiness, or when in my mentorship, when people ask me, I tell them, if over 70% of the time you feel like, oh my God, I love this, I am challenged, I am excited about this, then that is great. That is a great environment. That is how you measure it. But if it's the other way around, it is not worth your health. Because just think about it. What would you do? You would just quit that job if tomorrow you have a health issue, and let's say your doctor tells you you either have to stop like working or doing this job, or you're gonna die. What is your decision? And being in an environment, remember, like you're spending most of your time at work.
And even when you're not at work, you're thinking about
it. So that is impacting your whole life, your own personal well-being and happiness, your family, your environment, your friend relationships with everybody else outside of work too. If you're like constantly unhappy and stressed out at the job. And to me, it's not the one lifetime that you're going to live. It's not worth living it like that. And I know and I understand. I've been in those situations where it took me a while to finalize my decision. It's not always easy to say, oh, I am super unhappy tomorrow, I'm just going to go stop and quit my job, right? It is not as easy as that. If your decision is, I have to stay here because of these reasons, then you have to make it somehow work for you, where it's not a constant stress on you. And until you figure out what you want to do next. I was in a situation where at some point, I already knew that was not the right place or job for me. But it took me about a year. But it was for different reasons, right? Sometimes it's just hard because of the position you're in, because of maybe the salary you're making, because of you don't know what your next step is. It's really hard to make that decision. And that's why it took me almost a year to finally say, okay, I am done. And then I go figure out the next step later. But I was also at a point in my life where it was a little easier to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't have that dependency on having to have so much money coming in every month any longer. I was at a later stage in the life. And so it was easier for me to make that decision. But it worth it, every penny when I made that decision.
Right.
And once it's almost like you make a decision, and at the beginning it's very hard. It takes a little time, and then you're like, oh my God, I am so glad I made this decision. I am so relieved. I feel much better. I feel energized all over again.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah, because the happiness and also being unhappy at your job, it being toxic or whatever, because some people could be like, is something wrong with me? Do I need to change my attitude? Do I need to change something in my mind? Do I need to reframe it so I could be happier, right? Because like you said, if you're really dependent on that paycheck right now and you can't leave until you find another job, so at least you need to make that decision that I need to quit and find that other job. What can I do in my mindset so that I'm not like all the time stressed at all? So there's like that part of, okay, what responsibility we can take, and maybe get a help from a coach or get a therapist, make sure that you're getting enough self-care and time to talk and get the rest that you need so you're not burning out. But then there's another part of also being like, you know what, I can make those changes, but I cannot control the environment. And that's when you're like, I'm going to step into uncertainty, and I'm going to take that leap and trust, because you've made it this far. You've made it into this position, because I think I was in that position myself. And what would keep me from jumping out was like, this is the highest I've come so far. If I now take a leap, how long will it take me to climb up again? But it's like trusting that you can do it, because
Trusting in your abilities.
Yeah,
exactly. Trusting in you is super important.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something there as you were talking. I was like thinking about the same thing, is sometimes if you have that conversation with someone else, with a mentor, with a coach, with someone that is outside of that environment, it might set a different tone for you, where it gets you more comfortable. Maybe there are things that you have not experienced in the past, or how you're analyzing it is maybe not exactly right. Maybe you're
the story you're telling yourself.
It's interesting that my coach told me not long ago, are you making yourself stories? Oh, if my co-founder came and told me this, am I like taking that now, making myself all kinds of stories and getting myself really stressed out and unhappy without really understanding what that meant, where it came from? So what does that take? Oh, just have a conversation and that will clear it up. So that is also because we do that, especially maybe like at earlier ages, maybe certain environments, depending on the people, depending on, maybe we're in an environment, everybody's moving really fast, people not making the time to just stop and really build a relationship or have a conversation. So we end up making all kinds of stories just based on a simple word that we hear or a simple statement that somebody says in a meeting. So
that is the number one thing. I think me also realizing that our mind spins all these stories.
Exactly.
We have a really wild imagination. Someone will say something or not call you into a meeting, or something would happen and you'd be like, I'm getting fired because all these signals I'm picking up, and I just know I'm going to get fired today. And it's just a story we make up in our head. And I think once you realize that and you challenge yourself, like, what real facts do I have to justify the story that I'm telling in my head? And often you're like, you know what? It's all made up. You know, it's all made up. And one of the things that helps me also is not take life so seriously, or not take yourself so seriously, right? And people might say things, or some things might happen, but you also have to live your life a little bit lightly and enjoy it. And for that, you can't stress about every single thing.
Is because we set these big goals for ourselves, and we want to be the perfect in all aspects of it, and that pushes us to put so much more into the job that we have, or into work, and kind of at times even forget about, oh, I am a person and I need to step away from this, and I need to have other things in my life that adds on into my overall happiness and enjoyment. It's not just a job that can make you happy, right? For me, it's, my social calendar, how full it is, right?
Exactly.
How many people I'm having coffee with, or I'm going to dinner with this week? Am I seeing my friends and am I seeing my family? What are those things that outside of work is make me happy?
Yeah, and I often say we can't completely dissociate our work and home life. It's just one life, right? And it's going to spill over, and we have to learn to live with it. I think we get so much wisdom from you, having led teams, having worked in technical roles, having built companies. I would love to hear from you now what Zen Business is. Talk to us about how you stumbled on this problem that your company is solving, which is then being a real problem, has made it the success that it is today.
Yeah, thank you. So how it started and how it happened. First, I was at a point in my life where I had left my previous job. I was at HomeAway that was acquired by Expedia. And just a little bit about my journey there. I always say HomeAway was the longest part of my career journey. I was there for 11 years, basically from the very beginning until after acquisition by Expedia. And I was lucky enough and privileged enough to be able to grow with the company, and especially on the databases, all the internal systems. And all of that gave me so much learnings about a growing company. And especially a company where we were global. We acquired so many other companies globally. So there was a lot of new things to learn constantly. So then I decided that, okay, that was time for me to just take some time off. For the first time in my life, take a little time off without having a plan already that's waiting for me. And then decide what is it that I want to do next in life. And that next in life, I had no idea. I was like, it could be that I'm done, I am tired, I've already worked enough for an average 2 or 3 people in my life, or I just want to do volunteer work. I just want to see where I can apply my learnings and share it out and help. Or I might want to do something else, but I wasn't sure. Again, I was going to allow myself time to just relax and de-stress and then think about the next phase. And as I was like having meetings and coffee with people in my network or colleagues and talking about different opportunities, I was getting excited about doing something else. And doing something else at a kind of a really first stage or really early stage and at a different level and role. So I felt, oh my God, if I'm getting this excited about it, then maybe I should do something else too. This is not time for me to just sit back and not do anything.
Not yet.
So then I was having coffee with my friend and colleague of a long time, Ross Berdorf, and he was also at Expedia as a founding CTO, and he had left a few months before I did, and he was also taking some time off and figuring out what he wanted to do next in life. And he had just come across this idea of building something to support entrepreneurs and small businesses. And I got super interested in this idea because I always was very passionate about small businesses and entrepreneur. My father was an entrepreneur, self-employed. My husband was an entrepreneur, had different businesses. I have come across many people in my life, and I always admired and loved when people had an idea and were so brave to go try it out. And I saw this as an opportunity to build solutions to help that category that I was really passionate about. I'm always about supporting small businesses. So with that, and also knowing already like my co-founder and what I was getting into with him, and then knowing that I was going to be at a position at the company where I could bring in all of my best learnings and building like a company with a great culture, also building a company where there was this different aspect to it of, yeah, we're about money. We're all in this because we want to make money. We also have investors that we have to, answer back to. But we want to make sure at the same time that we are giving back to the community, to the society. And that's when we also decided that we want to make that part of our corporation charter, that we are a public benefit corporation, so that we don't lose track of the giving back and the community and the society support. So that is how, I decided that this was going to be the next thing that I'm going to do. And we started back in January of 2017. So what we do, Zen Business, we are a small business platform. Our idea is always, our strategy was, we want to have a one-stop shop and provide all the products and services that somebody, an entrepreneur that's just starting, needs, not only to start, but to manage and grow their company. And part of our strategy was always the best way we can ever learn more about what we're doing and how we're doing. And the best way to grow our footprint is by providing a great service to our customers. So that's always been really important for us, and to keep it easy and simple. And I know that you mentioned that earlier on. We're like, we have to start, we're always about how can we start everything like the simplest form possible, because things do get complicated over time. And to me, anybody you're building any kind of a solution, especially when it comes to technology, and luckily my co-founder and myself, we both have engineering and technology background. So we've been in those positions where we built stuff and nobody wanted to use, where start simple, keep it simple. Also because if I am an entrepreneur and I'm a one-man band, I have this expertise that I'm really good at, and I want to go focus on doing that. I don't want to deal with so many complicated things. And if I come to this company to help me solve for that, they need to keep it as simple as possible and take over the complication of stuff. So that was always part of our goal as well. So that's what we do.
Yeah, awesome. And since both of you are like experienced entrepreneurs, right? You've done this before. Was the journey to then get investors, get some funds to actually build the first prototype, get the MVP, easier for you? And then how did it go as you moved forward?
I would say it was easier. If we were still like very young and early on in our career, it probably would have been much harder, unless we had already proven the concept, unless we've already bootstrapped it and had a proof that this is going to be a great solution. But without those, what comes into play is, you've been there, done this at other companies, been successful at it. You have all these connections that you work with for so long. They vouch for you, and you have that experience and career behind you. And you also have done your studies, the market, what is the total available market, how are you going about it, what exact pain points you're trying to solve for. So all of that played a big role in us being able to encourage investors, especially early on, like day one, where we didn't have anything at all. We had the idea and the vision. And then as we, of course, were able to get the funding, we're able to build a little more. Then the later stages of fundraising became more about, here's the data. This is what we've accomplished so far. So we truly can prove it now of what the market looks like and what is it that we're able to do.
And how many people now work at Zen Business? What are some of the metrics you could share with us that you're really proud of?
Yeah, we have our whole team size, which when I say team, it includes both like full-time employees, and we also have great team outside of US in different countries. We are massive. We're like over 500 people. And so far, we have helped over 500,000 entrepreneurs starting, building, forming their entities for them, and getting them started on that journey. And yeah,
that's huge.
It's been an amazing ride so far.
Yeah, no, what a fascinating journey and also an inspiration for people. Like, sometimes people think it's too late now for me to start a business. But that's why I like to bring on people like you to say it's never too late and you can always reinvent yourself. And I think the main message really is like it's all about the relationships and the people that you meet. It's not only about, like you said, your success is the people that you are able to then help succeed, you know, how you can help and grow people, but it's also about how you successfully manage the relationships to allow you to succeed and be where you are today. So thank you for sharing.
If you're open to learn every day.
Yes.
I think that's what I say.
That's the key.
I'm still learning. I'm learning something new every day. And that's what keeps it interesting for me as well.
Yeah.
And I think if you're open to learn new things, if you're always open to listen and ask more and more and talk to different people, and that is part of what's going to help you to get to the next stage.
Yeah. And you have lived, since you moved to the U.S., in Austin for 45 years. And we're recording this here in Houston. So tell us about what made you just stay in Austin. It is a beautiful city. I've never lived there. I've visited several times and I know the vibe. But tell me about that from your perspective.
Yeah. I can tell you when I first moved to Austin at the age of 16, I was actually depressed for a while because I grew up in Tehran, Iran, capital city, just like New York City or just like London, 24/7. So I arrived in Austin on a Sunday, way back when, and as we were driving from the airport to my sister's place, my question was, does anybody live in this town? So I thought that this was not going to be the city for me, right? It was just way too quiet, again, those days. And one thing led to another as I was getting ready then to look for where I want to go to college. And being a foreign student, having to pay differently and a lot more for tuition and the cost of living, especially at the time where, you know, my parents in Iran, they wouldn't even be able to send. They were very limited and restricted on the amount of money that they could wire to me. And they had to do it on a monthly basis. Like they had to go in every month, show proof my kid is going to school. These are her grades. She is doing something, and that's why I want to send her this money. So there was a lot of criteria that I had to use in order to decide where I want to go to college. And when I applied to different universities, and of course, like going to a really good accredited university was important too. And then doing the analysis on the cost of living and tuition. Those days, like living in Austin and going to UT was going to be the least expensive option for me. And that's how I ended up staying in Austin, which I'm glad I did, and went to UT. And then after that, I met my husband, and he had businesses in Austin. We thought about it a couple of times, whether we want to move, because I'm like, let's move to New York City. Like I was still like wanted to move to a big city with a lot of activities. But then by that time, like some of our families started moving to US and they were in Austin. I already had like all these amazing friends that I did not want to move away from. All of that was in Austin. And now I can tell you, I'm so happy that I stayed. I love Austin. And I love what it has become also as a city. I feel like it's still a small city, but it has qualities of the big cities. And it's great that these days when I tell anyone that I'm in Austin, everybody knows about Austin now.
Everyone loves Austin.
Where like way back when they're like, oh, where is Austin? Oh, it's Texas? Like how flat? What all is
and Austin's an outdoorsy city, like compared to Houston.
And beautiful city.
It's a beautiful city. There's a lot of great surroundings. And we were talking before, you were talking about how you also managed to create like community. Not only that your family from Iran had moved in, but how you also keep some of that culture that I think is enriching for us in the U.S. So tell us about, if I'm to visit Austin, Is there a Persian restaurant that I should go to?
There are a couple of Persian restaurants actually in Austin. One is called Caspian Cafe, Caspian Grill, and another one is called Shandi's.
Okay.
Yeah, they're both. I would say there are smaller, much smaller scales of restaurants compared to the Persian restaurants in Houston.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, because we also spoke about some of the Persian restaurants in Houston. So I didn't know Caspian is actually from Austin.
It's not. They're different.
It's not. They're different.
They just named the same.
Okay,
yes.
so there's one Caspian here, and then there's Kasra. That's really famous. I know my parents go there all the time. And then there's a new one called Rumi.
Yeah,
So
I like to go there for lunch today.
Yeah. And if you love meat, Persian food is great.
But they have vegetarian
But there are vegetarian
options.
options too. I love like the eggplant stuff. Do you have a book that you would like to recommend to our audience, a book that maybe has a big influence on your life or something that allowed you to change perspective or gave you insights?
One book that I've read recently, which a friend of mine recommended, which has nothing to do with the career or with, it does mention some of that as a part of it, is Die with Zero. So I thought it's appropriate for me or anybody else to read that, regardless of what stage in life you're in. Because part of it is, what do you think that you keep on like waiting for to do in life that would really help with your overall health and happiness? It's almost like a wealth of your health, right? Yeah. So that was
thank you for that.
Interesting.
Die with Zero. I think that's from the title, a book that I would
know.
love to read.
I got even from the title.
Yeah.
I'm like, I really to read this, and then you read a first chapter, and you're like, oh, this is good. I can go through this faster.
Right.
Then it's more of an encouragement to read it throughout the whole thing and see what it talks about.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Shanaz.
Thank you very
coming
much
here.
for having me. This was great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, you're such an inspiration. Your own story of coming here as an immigrant, but also what Zen Business is doing, expanding from a small city in Austin, from Texas, like expanding to the rest of the U.S. and also globally. It's very inspiring, and all the lessons that you've shared with us, I think many of our listeners who would be able to relate and take those lessons and apply. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with us and for doing what you're doing with your company. There's a book that someone wrote, Julia Burston. She wrote a book called Women Lead Differently. And she studied women, and she found that when they're in middle management, they end up doing a lot of things that they're supposed to do, like they try to fit in. But then when they get to the top is when you actually start to see them performing differently and acting differently than men, or like the general stereotype of what we have as a leader. And that's where you say, it's not just about profit. It's about actually including people. It's actually good for the society, and actually thinking more holistically about how can we actually disrupt and change the system to make it better, not only for women, but people who are traditionally left out, and form these better solutions that are better for our environment, better for the society. And that's the kind of leadership we need in the future. So it's great inspiration for our young and upcoming leaders that you share that with us. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much for having me. I
Awesome.
enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the Something from Nada podcast. Hey, you made it this far. Give us a like and follow. If you'd like to learn more about how you can be a guest, a sponsor, or want to learn about my book, Determined to Lead, head to my website, www.nadaahmed.com. That's www.nadahmed.com. Thank you.